At 6, Farahs says he is hugely relieved as the government says no action will be taken after he revealed he was brought to the UK illegally. The Olympic champion was trafficked at the age of 9, brought to London by a woman he didn't know and told to change his name.
Most people know me as Mo Farah, but it's not my name or it's not the reality.
Mo speaks of the abuse he suffered after he was trafficked for domestic servitude, also on the programme. Former Health Secretary Sajid Javid pulls out of the Conservative leadership race as nominations close for those hoping to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. A BBC investigation finds evidence that the British SAS executed detainees and murdered unarmed people in Afghanistan. And the first extraordinary images from NASA's new telescope, distant galaxies and light from 13 billion years ago that have left scientists speechless.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, a miserable day for England. They're thrashed by India in the first of their one-day matches at the Oval.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Mo Farah has told the BBC that he is hugely relieved that the government says no action will be taken after he revealed he was trafficked illegally into the UK as a child and forced to work as a domestic servant. The 4-time Olympic champion says he was born Hussein Abdi Kahin, but was given the name Mohammed Farah by those who flew him from Eastern Africa to London with fake documents when he was 9 years old. Until now, he had always told people that he came with his parents to the UK from Somalia as a refugee. Our community affairs correspondent Adina Campbell has the story.
He's a household name, and winning double gold at London 2012 was one of the defining moments of the Olympics. But life for Mo Farah could have been very different, and we now know he's not who we think he is.
Most people know me as Mo Farah, but it's not my name or it's not the reality. The real story is I was born in Somaliland, north of Somalia, as Hussein Abdi Kahin.
In a new documentary, he also reveals he was a child slave after his mum sent him to Djibouti to live with his uncle. And that's when he was taken by a woman he'd never met, trafficked into London and forced to work for a family at the age of 9.
My job was to look after those kids, shower them, cook for them, clean for them.
Despite what was happening behind closed doors, Mo Farah was a cut above the rest as a teenager. After years of slave labour and finally being allowed to go to school, it was a conversation with his PE teacher who helped him escape from the abuse at home. The documentary relives the moment years later when he's given his mum's contact details. He'd thought she was dead.
My mum's name is Aisha. I'll never forget my mum on that tape. So the tape, it had a number on it, like say, or call on the back of it. This is the number. And then I remember he said, if this is a bother or causing you trouble, don't, just leave it. You don't have to contact me. And I'm going, no, of course I'm going to contact you. And at that point, that's when I first called my mum.
Mo's story has shone a light on the lived experiences of modern slavery and shows it can happen to anyone, even those who become superstars. The Home Office says no action will be taken against the 4-time Olympic champion. Adina Campbell, BBC News.
Well, Amal Rajan has been speaking to Mo and his family this afternoon, and huge relief on all kinds of levels.
Overwhelming relief. I mean, I think he has he and his wife Tanya, who I spoke to together, has an overwhelming sense of relief, both about the reaction of the Home Office, which you mentioned. I think he worried for years about what action they might take, and also at the overwhelmingly positive global reaction on social media, in newspaper headlines, from people that have known him as Mo and that have seen him become this this huge global icon. I did ask him, Sophie, we've just done it this afternoon, I did ask him why he's speaking out now. And, you know, he has lived this kind of double life, lived with this lie for, you know, decades now. And I think it's fair to say that he's agonised about when to come, you know, be open, when to come clean for years and years and years. He spoke to Tanya, his wife, just over 10 years ago before they got married. And he's got 4 kids. And he said there was something about seeing his twins, he's got twin girls, something about seeing them turn 8, which is roughly the age he was when he was trafficked illegally from Djibouti and East Africa to here. Something about seeing them turn that age, which just made him feel like he wanted to be open with both his family and with the public. He speaks very openly. He's clearly traumatised by his experience. He speaks openly about his years of domestic servitude, essentially a slave, cooking, cleaning, changing nappies, being threatened. And I did ask him specifically about the woman who trafficked him here to the UK, what has happened to her. He said he's fallen out of touch with her. He's got mixed emotions about her and her family, to put it mildly. The BBC production team behind the documentary did try to get in touch with her, but she didn't want to cooperate. So, yeah, we're just looking through the interview now, to be honest, and we'll have more for you at 10 o'clock. And
the documentary is on tomorrow night, BBC One?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Amol, thank you very much. Nominations for the Conservative Party leadership have just closed. Each candidate needed to secure the backing of at least 20 MPs in order to progress to the next round. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, seen here amongst the other leadership candidates, has just pulled out in the last few minutes. So are all the rest still in the race? Let's go straight to Westminster and to our political editor, Chris Mason. Do we know yet, Chris?
Sophie, an announcement in just the last couple of minutes. I can tell you there are 8 contenders on the ballot paper to try to become our next Prime Minister. Excuse the list, but it makes sense just to read it out because one of these will be our Prime Minister within just 8 weeks' time. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadeem Zahawi, he is there. Kemi Badenoch, former Minister. Suella Braverman, the Attorney General for England and Wales. Tom Tugendhat, backbencher. Jeremy Hunt, former Cabinet Minister. Penny Mordaunt, another former Cabinet Minister. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary. And the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who launched his campaign today. While waiting to hear from the early frontrunner, look who's loitering in the corner, the Deputy Prime Minister. And the Transport Secretary, himself a candidate until now, is here too.
Please welcome Rishi Sunak.
The early skirmishes of this contest have felt like all the other candidates against Mr Sunak. He pointedly repeated his critique today of what he sees as their wild promises to cut taxes now.
We need a return to traditional Conservative economic values, and that means honesty and responsibility, not fairy tales. Once we've gripped inflation, I will get the tax burden down. It is a question of when, not if.
So many of your colleagues have sought to demolish your record as Chancellor. Do you have the stomach for what's to come?
Well, I'm standing here today surrounded by friends and colleagues, which I've been... And Chris, that's what gives me the optimism, the confidence to do this. Thank you all very much.
Here's one of the reasons Mr Sunak sounds chipper, tempting a fellow candidate to give up and back him instead. God, chaps, I didn't have you down as a quitter. You've packed in before it starts.
Actually, I was delighted with the support that I got, but I also recognise that what we need, more than anything else, is somebody who can step straight into the role of Prime Minister in serious times.
So while 2 senior ministers dashed out of the Cabinet meeting to here to endorse Rishi Sunak, another 2 Cabinet ministers left Downing Street and straight away endorsed Liz Truss.
I've sat with Liz in Cabinet now for some time, very aware that she's probably a stronger Brexiteer than both of us. She has consistently argued for low tax policies.
Liz was always opposed to Rishi's higher taxes. That again is proper conservatism.
From barbs in Downing Street from backers of the Foreign Secretary to cheers down the road from those supporting the former minister Kemi Badenoch.
I tell the truth, I fight for change, I stand up for people, and I stand up for the causes and the country I love. Some might say this is no time for novices. I think this is no time for steady as it goes sinking into decline. It's time for change.
Kemi is bright, brilliant and brave. It's only very rarely in politics that you come across talents like that. And Kemi is undoubtedly, I think, a phenomenon. She's got the right stuff.
What do you say to our viewer who looks in on all of this at Westminster and thinks, what a carry-on?
We knew that the political climate was such that Boris had to stand down. This is the most diverse group of talent that I think that any political party in the world would be putting forward.
To another lectern, more applause and another cabinet endorsement, this time for Tom Tugendhat.
It's time for Tom.
We have retreated into the pettiness of politics that is more about personality than principle. When our nation needed our party to function, we retreated into faction. When the moment demanded service, we delivered scandal.
Tomorrow, voting begins and there are more launches to come to decide who gets to move into Downing Street. The temperature's rising in Westminster. It's no time for a lie down. And that's because the pace is about to quicken now. There'll be a hustings event here in Parliament for those 8 contenders in front of Conservative MPs starting in the next hour or so. Then that first round of voting taking place tomorrow afternoon between 1:30 and 3:30. And for those hoping to get onto the second round of voting, they'll have to cobble together the support of 30 MPs. So very quickly, within 48 hours, this race is going to crunch down with MPs having to very quickly decide who they want on that final ballot of 2 that will go to party members, and crucially, who they don't want. One final thought, it is not remotely clear who is going to win. It's not remotely clear who will be our next Prime Minister in fewer than 2 months' time.
Our political editor, Chris Mason, thank you. And Chris has given you a pretty good idea already. But to find out exactly how this leadership contest is going to unfold before a new leader is put in place on September the 5th, you can head to the BBC News website for much more information. An independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Telford in Shropshire has found that children suffered appalling abuse over decades, with their anguish made worse by the actions of police and the council. More than 1,000 children were exploited, with clear evidence that the exploitation was ignored, and children blamed instead of the perpetrators. Our Midlands correspondent Phil Mackey reports from Telford, and you may find some details disturbing.
A town where more than 1,000 children have been sexually exploited since the late 1970s. Young girls were groomed, often by gangs, and subjected to some of the most appalling abuse. After 3 years, the findings of an independent inquiry are damning.
Countless children were sexually assaulted and raped. They were deliberately humiliated and degraded. They were shared and trafficked. They were subjected to violence and their families were threatened. They lived in fear. Their lives were forever changed. They've asked over the years, how was this allowed to happen?
The answer, he believes, is that the authorities had ignored obvious signs of child exploitation, had blamed the children and not the perpetrators, and in many cases wouldn't investigate because of nervousness about race. The problems came to light during Operation Chalice, when 7 men of South Asian descent were convicted of offences against teenage girls. But the inquiry's spoken to victims of exploitation from many more communities. This afternoon I spoke to one. She was raped and trafficked. Instead of getting helped, she got a criminal record. Her words have been revoiced to protect her identity.
Victims were being identified as child prostitutes. Once you have been convicted, that label will never leave you. Prosecutions are damaging to your life. Some children went to prison for not paying the fines. Convictions should be completely expunged.
There are 47 recommendations which are made in the report, including that the Borough Council and police should set up a joint task force which should report back annually, that counselling should be provided for victims, and that money for specialist teams should be ring-fenced.
I do hope it's going to bring closure for a lot of people, but I also really hope it's going to open a lot of doors for other people.
Another survivor, who's known as Holly Archer, has set up the Holly Project in Telford to help other victims of child sexual exploitation.
For the likes of myself and other survivors who have sort of gone quite far on their journey now, For us, that is a form of closure, but also a form of fight for what happens next.
Tonight, West Mercia Police and Telford and Wrekin Borough Council apologised to all of the victims. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Telford.
A senior military commander has called for a public inquiry after a BBC investigation found evidence that the British SAS executed detainees and murdered unarmed people in Afghanistan. Colonel Oliver Lee, who was in charge of the Royal Marines in Helmand at the time, described the allegations as extremely shocking. Panorama has discovered that one unit killed 54 people in suspicious circumstances. The Ministry of Defence says it will always hold UK troops to the highest standards and that they served with courage and professionalism in Afghanistan. Richard Bilton reports.
The kill or capture raids happen most nights. The SAS were hunting for bomb makers, but something went wrong. What we have found suggests a pattern of deliberate killings.
We've spoken to eyewitnesses who were on some of these night raids. Now, they don't want to be identified, but they say they saw unarmed Afghans being shot dead by British Special Forces.
Panorama obtained military reports that show people were repeatedly shot dead after surrendering to the SAS. We looked at one SAS tour and identified 54 suspicious killings in just 6 months. This isn't just rogue troops on the ground. Our evidence shows that those at the very top of Special Forces were warned.
One of my team, an officer, has been told that there is in effect an unofficial policy to kill wherever possible fighting-age males on target.
What is extraordinary is senior officers didn't report the allegations to the Royal Military Police, but kept them in a secret classified file for another 4 years. The Ministry of Defence said in a statement today, "We believe that BBC Panorama's episode about SAS operations in Afghanistan jumps to unjustified conclusions from allegations that have already been fully investigated." But military investigators who worked on the main investigation into war crimes in Afghanistan have told us they were stopped from getting to the truth.
It became increasingly clear to me that it didn't matter what evidence we were able to gather. These cases were never going to be allowed to go to court.
We put our findings to Colonel Oliver Lee, who was in charge of the Royal Marines in Helmand at that same period.
I think allegations of the kind that you're making are incredibly shocking, and if they are true, then they would make me deeply sad and also deeply angry. My experience is that the military finds it very difficult to look at serious failure in the chain of command.
So allegations on this level merit a public inquiry?
I would say so, yes.
The Ministry of Defence says military police will consider any allegations should new evidence come to light. But some believe it is time to look again at the behaviour of SAS death squads that arrived in the night. Richard Bilton, BBC News.
And Panorama, SAS Death Squads Exposed, is on BBC One at 9 p.m. tonight, or you can also watch it on BBC iPlayer. Now, the time is coming up to 6:20. Our top story this evening. The Olympic star Mo Farah has revealed he was trafficked into the UK as a child and forced to work as a domestic servant. And coming up, Heathrow Airport is limiting the number of passengers who can fly out each day over the summer to try to reduce travel disruption.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, Tiger Woods says he's feeling good ahead of the Open this week. He'll tee off alongside US Open champion Matt Fitzpatrick, but the breakaway Live Golf Series continues to get attention at St Andrews.
It is getting hotter and hotter across many parts of the UK this week. Some experts say we could be heading for the most prolonged heatwave for 50 years. The Met Office has issued a weather warning for extreme heat this weekend in England and Wales. Sunday and Monday are set to be the hottest, and these areas in orange show where there's an amber warning for extreme heat on those days. Records could be broken. Our correspondent John Donnison is in Cambridge. He'll explain why. John.
Hi there. Well, it's a pretty sticky evening, I can tell you, here by the River Cam in Cambridge, Sophie. But the reason we've come to Cambridge is because it was here 3 years ago that the hottest ever temperature recorded in the UK was taken. But such is the extent of this week's heatwave that forecasters say that record could fall in the coming days.
On another scorcher, what better way to try and cool off than a pint and a punt? Temperatures in Cambridge once again up around 30 degrees and forecast to go hotter still.
It's humid. I love it. It's lovely being warm, and it's great being outside. I just get a bit sticky.
I absolutely love it because I've just been on holiday and I've come back and it's exactly the same weather that it was there.
It was here in the Botanic Garden in Cambridge where the hottest temperature ever recorded in the UK was taken. That was in 2019, 38.7 degrees. But the forecasters think that could be broken later this week. And the truth is that such temperatures are really not that unusual anymore. Every year for the past 10 years has seen temperatures above 32 degrees.
Scientists like Professor Emily Shuckburgh at the University of Cambridge say climate change in the UK is already literally costing lives.
In 2020, more than 2,500 people died in heat-related deaths in one of the severe heat waves we saw that summer. So it really is something that is starting to impact us, not just in terms of the financial cost, but the human cost as well.
It's especially worrying times for farmers. Here in Norfolk, they grow potatoes, carrots and onions for supermarkets. But the heat means they're going through 50,000 litres of water an hour to irrigate their crops. And reservoirs that would normally be half full at this time of year are at only 15% capacity.
I think we're sort of near record-breaking temperatures. We're certainly near record-breaking evapotranspiration rates, which means that the water is just absolutely pouring through these crops. That's fueled by the wind and the high temperatures and the high levels of sunlight at the moment. So the real challenge is to get enough water on these crops to sustain them.
Wheat is a particular worry. There are fears that if the heat wave continues, it could affect the autumn harvest, putting even further pressure on food prices, which are already surging. John Donnison, BBC News in Cambridge.
Heathrow Airport has introduced a cap on the number of passengers flying out of the airport this summer. No more than 100,000 people a day will be able to depart from Heathrow between now and September the 11th. The problem is there are still not enough staff at check-ins, security and baggage handling to allow more flights to run smoothly. Our business correspondent Caroline Davis is at Heathrow. So can we expect even more flight cancellations now?
In short, Sophie, yes. At the moment, this is Heathrow saying that it can't cope with the number of passengers that it's currently expecting to see over the course of the summer, and those extra 4,000 passengers a day will equate to flight cancellations. Now, exactly how the axe will fall, we don't know. We don't know how many flights exactly will be cancelled, and we don't know which airlines at the moment will be the worst affected. That is still being worked out. Now, there are fewer passengers travelling from Heathrow Airport than there were before the pandemic. Back in 2019, during the course of the summer then, there'd be about 110 to 125,000 passengers that will be departing from Heathrow every day. Now, that's expected to be about 104,000 at the moment for this summer period. However, Heathrow said that it's under-resourced for that, and so it's capping the numbers at 100,000. Airlines will now have to work with an intermediary to see exactly how that's going to affect their flight schedules. Now, Heathrow is saying that this is the responsible thing to do, that this is a way of trying to avoid any other further chaos or disruption at the airport. But there's already some people in the industry and the airlines that are saying that this is due to mismanagement from Heathrow Airport and that they think this decision should have been made and announced earlier.
Caroline Davis, thank you. British horse racing is cracking down on jockeys who use the whip too much on their horses. The horse will be disqualified under new rules if jockeys seriously breach the rules in place by using 4 or more strikes above the permitted levels. If the new rules had been in place earlier this year, Grand National winner Noble Yates would have been disqualified. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott reports.
Delta Work and Santini for the place.
Victory in the world's most famous horse race, but a jockey breaking whip rules to get there. If the tougher measures announced today had been in place, this year's Grand National winning horse and all those associated with it would have been stripped of the race. The head of British Racing hopes the changes will safeguard the sport's future.
We're the second biggest spectator sport in this country. People love going racing, but we can't rest on our laurels, particularly with the opinion of the younger generation. And so listening to them, continuing to modify what we do and to enforce this new set of regulations in the right way, I'm confident will put us in a great place.
The 2-year whip review has resulted in 20 recommendations, including disqualification for flagrant whip abuse, defined as 4 strikes or more over the limit. Penalties will be doubled for major races, and jockeys will be restricted in how they can hold the whip to limit force. For some, this is purely about optics.
It's not a welfare issue, you know. British racing is massive on the welfare of their horses. It looks messy sometimes, and if they can bring that in and make it look a bit tidier, the public won't mind it so much.
For others, it is just as much about ethics. Are you comfortable putting your name to a report that retains the use of the whip for encouragement when a lot of people would have liked to have seen it banned?
We would much prefer the whip for encouragement to be removed, and I made that position very clear during the course of the discussions and still keep that position. But it's very dangerous to look at this as a binary thing. There's a journey, and now we're a road on that journey.
Ahead of the changes being implemented in the autumn, racing has work to do, convincing sceptics that this latest approach to the ever-divisive whip strikes the right balance. Laura Scott, BBC News.
Now, have a look at this. These are some of the very first images released by NASA, European and Canadian space agencies from the world's most advanced telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, which was launched into space last year. Extraordinary images, the deepest, most detailed view of the universe that we have ever seen. Scientists say they were left speechless when they saw the first images, light from galaxies that has taken many billions of years to reach ours. Our science editor, Rebecca Morell, reports.
The beauty of our universe, as never seen before, captured by the James Webb Space Telescope. These are the cosmic cliffs of the Carina Nebula. Amidst the dust, stars are being born. This is a new view of Stephan's Quintet, 300 million light-years away, where vast galaxies are caught in a celestial dance. And the deepest ever view of space. It's teeming with galaxies, some from just a few 100 million years after the dawn of the universe.
To have worked on a mission for this long, to be able to finally see it come to fruition, to do what it's supposed to do, it's absolutely incredible. The images are amazing themselves, just as images, but the hint of the detailed science we're going to be able to do, of what we're going to be able to learn from these images, is what makes me so excited.
The telescope blasted off last year on Christmas Day, and over the last 6 months, it's been getting ready for its mission.
The James Webb Space Telescope is an engineering marvel. At its core is a 6.5 metre wide mirror made up of 18 hexagonal segments, each perfectly aligned to act as a single surface. It also has a sun shield the size of a tennis court to protect it from the heat and light of the sun. The telescope will look back further in time than ever before, showing us the light from the very first stars to shine. We'll also be able to see how they came together to form the earliest galaxies. And it will study other planetary systems, revealing whether life could exist beyond our world.
It's almost like a time machine. You're looking back into the far distant past. And so we can begin to answer those questions, such as how did the first galaxies and stars formed? I mean, the hope with this telescope is we see sort of almost in real time, as it were, a history of the universe playing out.
The telescope also captured this, 2,000 light years away. It's a star going through its death throes.
In some strange way, it's a pretty view of something decaying and dying, but we're able again to look at that material as it flows away from the star and understand something about the evolution of the star. So going from star birth in the star forming regions all the way through to star death.
But this is just the start for the telescope. Over the coming days and months, more and more images will be captured. Our knowledge of the universe and our place in it is about to be transformed. Rebecca Morrell, BBC News.
Extraordinary images. Let's look at the weather here now with Darren Bett. I know what you're going to say. Hot.
Well, you see, because today we've seen much more cloud across the UK, and for many parts of the country, temperatures have been a bit lower than they were yesterday. Not so here in London. I managed to walk round a few spots of rain earlier on and temperatures reached 30 degrees. Different story, though, where they're preparing for the Open. Sunshine here, but temperatures into the low 20s. And that cooler, fresher, clearer air that we've got in the north is going to push southwards following this band of cloud that could still bring a few spots of rain overnight, but nothing significant. And for most of us, it's going to be a more comfortable night for sleeping, except in the southeast where we've still got those very high temperatures. And across southern parts of England tomorrow, we start with cloud. Maybe 1 or 2 spots of rain. That'll move away. The odd shower comes into Northern Ireland and Scotland, but some sunny spells and more sunshine than today across England and Wales, but not necessarily any warmer. In fact, temperatures may be a little bit cooler for tomorrow, but we've still got that stubborn heat there in the southeast of England. Moving into Thursday, more of a northwesterly breeze. That will bring more showers, perhaps to Northern Ireland, Scotland, 1 or 2 for Northern England, but further south it's still dry and there's still more sunshine. But it's continuing to cool down just a little bit. Even in the southeast of England, temperatures are more comfortable, 27 degrees. So it's cooling down for a while and then it heats up. Not so much for Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England. Sunday, Monday, temperatures nearer the mid-20s. But it's in across this area of England and Wales where we have this extreme heat warning from the Met Office that temperatures are going to soar, not just on Sunday, but now into Monday as well. And you can see in the strong sunshine how those temperatures rise significantly. It's going to be hotter than it's been over the last couple of days. We've got 36 in London. Those temperatures could get even higher. Sophie.
Darren, thank you. And that is it from us on the BBC News at 6. It is time right now to join our colleagues across the nations and the regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.